Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and today I'm speaking to Martin Sadler of HP. And you're actually standing in front of a live feed of the HP Lab sort of cyber defense monitoring system, which is sort of looking at HP as an enterprise and all the areas where they might be under attack. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. You know, cybersecurity, cyber criminals are becoming so much more sophisticated these days. It's very easy to be the bad guy. You know, how can the industry really stay one step ahead?
Yes, indeed. I mean, we're seeing a lot of sophistication in attacks. We're also seeing a lot of increase in volume of the attack, and as we introduce new technologies, we're increasing the attack surface, the opportunity to attack in new ways that we haven't actually seen before. What does the industry need to do about it? Well, companies need to put in place basics to start with, the kind of recommendations that the UK government makes as part of its Cyber Essentials programme. That's things like having firewalls in place, looking after your patch management, all the obvious controls that hopefully every company out there, every company watching this already has in place. Assuming that's happening, then we can look at some additional protections. It's like having a strategy around encryption. How do you encrypt all your data at rest? How do you encrypt it when it's on the move? How do you then manage all the keys to look after all that encrypted data so that it can't get lost, but the bad guys can't see it? But protections aren't enough, because no matter how many we put in place, someone out there, being very clever, will find a way through. And so we have to also detect. We have to look for what is going on our networks. And what you see behind me is just some of the tools that we actually employ in HP to look at sophisticated attacks and picking up on them. So you need to detect what is going on and have a good handle on that. And then, of course, you will find some bad stuff on your networks. And so it's about how you remediate. How do you recover? How do you get your world back together when you've had a sophisticated attack that perhaps hasn't just hit one client device or one server, it's hit a large part of your infrastructure. Maybe an activist group going out there to derail you in some way, maybe a foreign nation state, maybe cyber criminals, but whoever it is, they may have, you know, an intention to destroy your business in some way. So it's how do you get back to normal when you've come under a very large scale kind of attack. So protect, detect, recover.
So in order for banks to follow those steps, a lot of them might have to introduce, you know, new technologies into the enterprise. And what I know from banks is that they're very risk averse when it comes to introducing new IT and new technologies. I mean, how do you really work with the financial services industry to allow them to embrace new technologies without sort of experiencing some of the risks that they fear they might bring in?
Well, I think it's just that, Liz. It's start with the risk assessments. Yes, there's a lot of enthusiasm for new technologies and a lot of fear. And so you have to understand what risks that you're actually bringing on board. And with new technologies, they're often poorly understood. So start with the risk assessment. Then again, it's back to protect. It's putting the technology controls in place to isolate, to protect, to separate concerns around whatever new technology you're introducing. And then the really key thing is about governance. It's about monitoring, looking after all this technology from a business point of view and checking that the return on investment that you're expecting from your new experiment that you're trying out or the new technology you're introducing is actually delivering you that without introducing new risks. So it is about do that risk assessment, put in place the technology controls, primarily around about isolating, separating concerns, and then governance.
So another thing I wanted to talk about, especially when it concerns banks, is regulations and data. Banks have all this data that they have to deal with, and of course they have all these regulations they have to comply with. How do regulations really affect how data is stored and accessed and distributed?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot in recent years of big debates around some of these issues. Debates around privacy, debates certainly in the United States around net neutrality, about, you know, whose bits can get carried on the internet and at what cost. And we're going to see an increasing number of these debates about where your data can be stored. And different countries are going to end up with different positions and different regulatory regimes around who can access what data for what purposes. And this is going to impinge on lots of verticals. In particular, it's going to impinge on financial services and financial services industries in a big way, I think. So what do companies need to do? What do banks need to do? They need to understand where these debates are coming from. What is the next regulation likely to be for Europe, for the United Kingdom? What is going to happen next? Have your finger on the pulse on the debates and maybe even be influencing the direction that governments and regulators will be taking. And at the same time, you have to know where your own data actually is.
Yes, yeah. The data doesn't stick around.
Data doesn't stay around. Yes, it doesn't respect sovereign boundaries very well. So you need to understand where you've currently got it. So if some regulation changes, what it is that you need to do about it. And then, of course, it's having the kind of agile, flexible infrastructure that enables you to move stuff if you need to move it, to change your technology base quite quickly so that you can adapt to whatever new regulatory framework is being introduced. So stay agile.